Don't move. The words came out of the dark before the woman even realized someone was there. She froze beside the fence. The two children clinging to her coat went still as stones. The boy tightened his grip on her sleeve. The younger girl pressed her face against the woman's hip and stared into the night. A rifle barrel rested across the wooden rail of the fence. The cowboy stood behind it, head low, eyes hard. Hands where I can see them. The woman lifted her hands slowly. Her fingers were red from cold. The wind pushed through the open field and rattled the fence wire. We weren't stealing, she said quietly. The cowboy didn't answer. His eyes moved past her. He saw the children. Thin coats. Mud on their boots. Their breath drifting white in the cold air. The boy spoke first. We didn't take anything. The cowboy lowered the rifle a few inches. Why are you on my land? The woman hesitated. We were just passing. That's not passing. She swallowed. We needed somewhere to stop. The cowboy stepped closer to the fence. The lantern hanging from a post lit their faces now. He noticed the bruising around her wrist. Dark marks under the sleeve. He pointed with the rifle. Who did that? She didn't answer. The boy answered instead. The sheriff. The cowboy's jaw tightened. You sure about that? The woman shook her head slightly toward the boy. Don't. But the boy kept talking. He burned our house. The girl began crying softly. The cowboy lowered the rifle completely. What happened out there? The woman looked down at the frozen ground. For a moment it seemed like she might say nothing at all. Then she whispered. My husband died tonight. How? They said it was an accident. And you don't believe them? No. The boy stepped forward. He didn't fall. The woman grabbed his arm. Enough. But the words were already out. The cowboy studied the three of them carefully. The wind lifted the edge of his coat. Somewhere far out in the dark, a coyote cried. You're running. Yes. From the sheriff. Yes. The cowboy leaned his elbows on the fence rail and watched them for a long moment. You understand something, he said. If he's after you, he'll come here. The woman nodded. I know. Then why stop at my fence? Her answer came out simple and tired. Because the children can't walk anymore. The girl sniffled. My feet hurt. The boy whispered. Mine too. The cowboy glanced at the road beyond the pasture. The dirt path that led straight to town. If the sheriff was hunting them, riders would come that way. He looked back at the woman. You got a name? Clara. And the kids? Daniel and Ruth. The cowboy nodded once. I'm Caleb. The boy looked up at him. Are you going to turn us in? Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped over the fence and walked toward them slowly. The lantern light showed the tired lines in Clara's face. She looked like someone who had been running for years, not hours. Caleb spoke quietly. Show me your hands. She did. He turned her wrist gently and studied the burn mark there. That's from rope. Yes. They tie you up? She nodded. For questioning. Daniel suddenly spoke again. They hit Dad too. Clara closed her eyes. Daniel. Caleb looked toward the road again. Then he said something that made Clara stiffen. You need to get off this fence line. She frowned. Why? Because if riders come over that hill, they'll see you standing here. The girl tugged her coat. Mom, I'm cold. Caleb made his decision. Come on. Clara didn't move. Where? My barn. She stared at him. You don't know what you're doing. Caleb opened the gate. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. Daniel looked at his mother. Can we trust him? Clara studied Caleb's face. There was something calm there. Something stubborn. Finally she nodded. All right. They stepped through the gate. The moment their boots touched the ranch land, the wind shifted across the field. The barn door creaked softly in the distance. Caleb walked ahead, holding the lantern. Stay close. Ruth clutched Clara's coat tighter. Are the bad men coming? Clara whispered. I don't know. Halfway to the barn, Caleb stopped suddenly. He tilted his head toward the road. Clara heard it too now. Distant hoofbeats. More than one horse. Daniel's voice shook. Mom! Caleb turned toward them. Inside. Now. They hurried into the barn. The door slammed shut behind them. The hoofbeats grew louder outside. Someone shouted across the dark field. Rancher! Caleb looked at Clara and the children. Stay quiet. The voice came again. You seen a woman and 2 kids come through here tonight? The barn door thudded shut behind them, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been. Clara stood frozen for a moment, listening. Outside, the wind scraped along the wood walls and the horses in the far stalls shifted their weight. Daniel and Ruth moved toward the hay without being told. Their legs gave out the moment the fear loosened its grip. Daniel sat down hard. Ruth curled beside him, pulling her knees close to her chest. Caleb hung the lantern on a nail in the beam. Yellow light spread slowly across the barn. Dust floated in the air. Old tools leaned against the wall. The place smelled like hay and leather. Caleb looked at Clara. You've got 5 seconds to tell me the truth. She didn't seem offended. That was the truth. Not all of it. Clara rubbed her cold hands together. My husband is dead. How? Sheriff said he fell. You don't believe that? No. Caleb stepped closer. So what really happened? Clara looked at the floor for a long second. They came at night. Who came? The sheriff and 2 deputies. What for? My husband had something they wanted. Caleb's eyes narrowed. What was it? Before she could answer, a voice shouted outside. Rancher! Daniel flinched. Ruth grabbed Clara's coat again. Caleb lifted a hand toward them. Quiet. Another voice followed. You hear me out there? Hoofbeats moved slowly across the yard now. Caleb leaned closer to Clara. Talk fast. She nodded. My husband found documents. What kind? Old land records. Caleb waited. Proof the sheriff's family stole half the valley years ago. Caleb studied her face. That's a big claim. I know. Where are those records now? Clara slowly reached inside her coat. Caleb's hand moved toward the revolver at his belt. She pulled out folded papers. Here. He took them and unfolded the pages under the lantern light. The ink was faded but still readable. Names. Dates. Signatures. Daniel whispered. That's the ones Dad found. Caleb glanced toward him. You read them? No. Then how do you know? Dad said they were dangerous. Outside the barn, a deputy shouted again. Rancher, answer up. Caleb folded the papers slowly. So your husband finds proof the sheriff's family stole land? Clara nodded. Yes. And the sheriff burns your house down the same night your husband dies? Yes. Caleb exhaled quietly. That's a rough coincidence. Daniel suddenly spoke. He killed Dad. Clara grabbed his arm. Daniel. But the boy's eyes stayed locked on Caleb. I saw him. Caleb turned toward him. You saw what? The sheriff hit Dad. Clara closed her eyes briefly. That's enough. But Caleb's voice stayed calm. Let the boy talk. Daniel swallowed. He said Dad was digging into things that didn't belong to him. Caleb glanced at Clara. And then? Daniel's voice trembled. Then he hit him again. Ruth began crying softly now. Clara pulled the girl close. It's over. Caleb walked to the barn door and listened. The deputies were moving closer now. He could hear saddle leather creaking. One of them knocked hard on the wood. Rancher. Caleb looked back at Clara. If they find you in here. She finished the sentence quietly. We're dead. Daniel whispered. They'll hang Mom. The deputy outside knocked again, harder. Open up. Caleb looked at the children. Then at the papers in his hand. Then at Clara. You trust me? She gave a tired laugh. Not really. Fair enough. Another shout from outside. Rancher, we know you're home. Caleb moved to the door. Clara grabbed his arm. Wait. He looked down at her hand. If you tell them, she said quietly, I understand. Caleb studied her face for a long moment. Then he gently pulled his arm free. Stay quiet. He stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. The cold air hit him hard. 3 riders waited in the yard, their horses stamping the dirt. The lead deputy leaned forward in his saddle. Evening. Caleb rested one hand on the fence rail. Evening. The deputy glanced toward the barn. You alone tonight? Caleb nodded. Just me. The deputy pointed toward the road. Sheriff's looking for someone. That right? A woman and 2 kids. Caleb kept his voice calm. What did they do? Deputy spat in the dirt. Sheriff says the woman murdered her husband and burned the house down. Caleb tilted his head slightly. Sounds serious. It is. The deputy's eyes drifted back to the barn. You seen anyone come through here tonight? Caleb shook his head once. Nope. The deputy studied him carefully. You mind if we take a look around? Caleb's hand tightened on the fence rail. Mind a lot. The deputies exchanged glances. Inside the barn, Clara slowly opened a toolbox beside the hay. Her fingers closed around the grip of an old revolver. Daniel whispered. Mom? She lifted the gun carefully. Just in case. Outside, the deputy leaned forward in his saddle again. You hiding something, rancher? Caleb shrugged slightly. Only cattle. The deputy stared at him another moment. Then he smiled thinly. Well. He turned his horse slowly. If you see that woman. Caleb nodded once. I'll let you know. The riders began moving down the road again. But one of them looked back at the barn. And something about the quiet ranch didn't sit right with him. Caleb watched the deputies ride off, the hoofbeats fading into the night. The barn smelled of hay and cold leather. Clara still clutched the revolver, though her hands weren't steady enough to raise it. Daniel and Ruth huddled together, eyes wide and quiet. Caleb set the papers on a crate, the edges curling in the cold. He leaned against the wooden post and exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders a fraction. You think they'll come back? Clara asked. Her voice was low, tight with worry. They might. Caleb's eyes scanned the yard. But they won't find you in here. Not tonight. Daniel's lips trembled. Why are they after us? Clara put a hand on his shoulder. Because my husband found something he shouldn't have. Something dangerous. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah. And now it's dangerous for you too. Ruth tugged at Clara's sleeve. Mom, what's dangerous? Clara kneeled beside her daughter. People who don't play fair. People who hurt families to cover up what they did. Caleb's jaw tightened. He glanced at the barn door, listening. The wind pushed against the boards, a soft creaking echoing through the empty space. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried again. The children shivered. "Show me the papers," Caleb said, gesturing toward the crate. Clara hesitated, then carefully handed them over. Caleb spread them out under the lantern. Dates, names, old stamps. Some ink smudged. Some signatures barely legible. Each page felt heavy, as if the paper carried years of betrayal. "You understand what this means?" he asked. Clara nodded. She looked pale, but her eyes burned. "They stole everything. My family's land. My husband wanted to fight back." Caleb's fingers brushed the inked names. "Not just land. Family history. Proof the sheriff's family took it all." Daniel leaned closer. "Is that why they killed Dad?" "Exactly why," Clara whispered. Her voice trembled. "Because he saw the truth." Caleb let the silence hang for a moment. Outside, a soft wind rattled the barn roof. He looked at the children, then at Clara. "You trust me?" Clara gave a small, humorless laugh. "Not really. But we don't have a choice. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to make sure they can't." Caleb's voice was firm, quiet, steady. He looked past them to the open yard. "If the sheriff comes, he's looking in the wrong place." Ruth whimpered. "Mom, they'll find us." Clara pressed the girl to her chest. "Not if we stay quiet. Not if we're smart." Caleb turned toward the barn entrance. "I need to go outside for a minute. Make sure the road is clear." Clara's hands tightened on the revolver. "You shouldn't." "I have to." He opened the door just a crack, peeking into the dark yard. 3 horses waited, none in sight now. The ground was soft, tracks fading in the dirt. Caleb stepped out, lantern in hand. The air cut sharp against his face. He walked slowly toward the fence, listening. The night was still. Only the distant coyote cried again. "You hear that?" Daniel whispered. Clara shook her head. "I do," Caleb said. "It's just the night." He glanced back at the barn. "Stay close. Stay quiet. Don't make a sound." The deputies' voices were far now, fading. Caleb leaned against the fence, lantern low, eyes scanning the horizon. The wind tugged at his coat. Something didn't feel right. Something in the barn, a creak, a shadow, a smell of wet dirt, made him frown. "You hiding something?" a voice said suddenly. Caleb spun. It was the deputy who had turned back once before, dismounted, standing under the moonlight. "I'm not hiding anything," Caleb said, calm. "Just checking the fence." The deputy stepped closer, boots crunching on dry grass. "That's so?" "Yeah." "Just the fence," Caleb repeated. His hand hovered near his revolver, but he kept it relaxed. The deputy tilted his head, looking toward the barn. "You sure?" "Could have sworn I saw movement." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Maybe you did. Could have been a shadow. Could have been a fox." The deputy frowned. "All right." "You're sure?" "Positive," Caleb said. "Now, I suggest you ride on before you get yourself stuck out here." The deputy studied him one last time, then nodded. "Maybe I will." Caleb exhaled, letting the tension leave his shoulders slowly. The deputy turned and walked back to his horse. Soon the sound of hooves faded again, swallowed by the night. Caleb glanced at the barn, then at Clara and the children. Daniel let out a small breath, Ruth clinging tighter to her mother. "You okay?" Caleb asked. Clara nodded slowly. "For now." "Good." Caleb picked up the papers again. "We have work to do. If they come back, we won't have another chance to stop them." Clara swallowed. What do we do? Caleb's gaze stayed on the lantern light reflecting off the hay. We wait. We plan. And we make sure they don't find you where they think you are. Daniel looked at him with wide eyes. Are we safe? For now, Caleb said. But safety doesn't last long around here. The wind shifted again, rattling the barn roof. Ruth whimpered softly. Clara pressed the girl close. Caleb walked to the barn door and leaned against the frame. Outside, the dark felt endless. Somewhere beyond, a coyote cried. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them. The children were watching him, the papers in his hand. Clara's face was pale, determined. They had nowhere else to turn. Caleb turned toward them, voice low but steady. You stay here. Don't move. Don't say a word. If they come back, they're looking in the wrong place. The barn seemed to hold its breath. Dust floated in the lantern light. The night waited with them. And somewhere in the distance, the road led straight to town, where the sheriff and his men were already making their moves. Caleb knew it. Clara knew it. The children could feel it too. The night pressed close, heavy and silent, and the barn became a fragile fortress. Caleb glanced at the papers again, tracing the names of people who had vanished, stolen from, buried in lies. The sheriff had taken everything once. Caleb wouldn't let him take this family too. Outside, the moon drifted behind clouds. Inside, the small family waited. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound of wind or shifting hay felt like an approaching threat. And Caleb, standing by the barn door, knew the next moments could decide who lived, who died, and who finally saw the truth. They stayed like that until the wind died down, until the shadows shifted and settled, until the fear in the barn quieted just enough for them to breathe. But Caleb knew it wouldn't last. Not for long. Not with the sheriff hunting them and the truth burning brighter than any fear. The night stretched on. And somewhere out there, the sheriff's deputies rode slowly, thinking they knew where to look. Caleb adjusted the papers in his hand. They were looking in the wrong place. Caleb stepped fully into the barn, shutting the door behind him. The lantern swung slightly from the post, casting long shadows across the walls. Clara still held the revolver, but she was calmer now, her knuckles white but steady. Daniel and Ruth crouched together near the hay, their eyes wide, mouths pressed tight. Caleb set the papers on the crate, smoothing the edges. Dust motes floated in the warm light, dancing over the old tools leaning against the walls. You trust me now? Caleb asked, his voice low. Clara shook her head slowly. I don't have a choice. Do I? No, Caleb said, watching her. But you can tell me everything. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. The land. The deeds. The sheriff's family, they took it all from us decades ago. My husband found proof. Her voice faltered. And then they killed him. Caleb's eyes narrowed. And the rest of your family? She shook her head. We're the only ones left. Ruth whimpered softly. Clara pressed the girl to her chest. Caleb crouched near the crate, studying the papers. These aren't just land records. These names. Some of them match your father's handwriting. Clara froze. What do you mean? Caleb tapped one page, pointing to a name barely legible in faded ink. Your father. He didn't disappear like everyone said. He was here. Somewhere buried in all of this. Clara blinked. Buried? Caleb's jaw tightened. I don't know where yet. But this land, it remembers. And it hides secrets. Daniel spoke up, voice shaking. Is he down here too? Caleb's eyes didn't leave the paper. He shook his head slowly. Maybe. Maybe not. But the sheriff, he's left a trail. Ruth tugged at Clara's sleeve. Mom, are we in danger? Clara looked at Caleb. Always. He studied the children. You have to understand something. This land, these papers, your family history, it's all tied together. Sheriff's family isn't just stealing land. They're covering graves. Past and present. Clara swallowed, glancing around the barn. Her eyes landed on the old wooden floorboards. Something about the shadows seemed different now. Caleb noticed it too. The dust shifting, the sound of a loose board creaking. He pointed to the corner. See that? That's where they hide things. Sometimes bodies. Sometimes proof. Sometimes both. Clara's hand tightened around the revolver. Bodies? Caleb nodded slowly. Some graves don't stay quiet. And some people aren't gone until someone remembers them. Daniel whispered, voice small. Like ghosts? Caleb's gaze softened. Yeah. Like ghosts. And right now, we're walking among them. Clara stepped toward the crate, laying the revolver down gently. Then we need to find the proof. Before they find us. Caleb unfolded the next sheet, studying the names and stamps. Your father worked here. He found out what the sheriff's family had done. And they didn't let him leave. Clara's lips pressed together. Then we're digging into it. Tonight. Caleb nodded, careful. We start small. We find the weak points. We use the barn, the fences, whatever's hiding in plain sight. Ruth looked up, eyes wide. Mom, will it hurt us? Clara hugged her tight. We'll be careful. Daniel whispered to Caleb, voice urgent. Are they coming back? Caleb studied the open doorway. Eventually. But they won't know where to look. Clara leaned closer. Do you know where to start? He ran a hand over the papers. The sheriff's family left clues. Old deeds, old letters, old names buried beneath new lies. And sometimes, a loose board or a well, that's where you'll find the answers. The barn seemed to grow colder. The shadows stretched, the lantern light flickered. Caleb's eyes lingered on the floorboards. Something felt buried beneath them. A scent of damp earth, of decay. You've been quiet, Clara said. I'm thinking, Caleb admitted. The sheriff isn't just a man. He's a symbol. And symbols, they protect what they took. We have to be smart. Clara nodded, drawing the children close. Then we'll be smart. Caleb lifted one of the papers. Your father left signs here. Marks in the corners, codes in the ink. This land has a memory. And memories don't lie. Daniel whispered, then. Dad wanted us to find it? Caleb didn't answer right away. He stared at the papers, tracing the faded handwriting. Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted someone to remember. The wind rattled the barn roof again. Ruth whimpered. Caleb glanced up. It's okay. We're still inside. We're still alive. That counts for something. Clara pressed her forehead against the crate. We have to uncover it before they do. Before the sheriff finds the trail. Caleb nodded. We start here. In this barn. We use what we have. The fence, the shadows, the land itself. If we move carefully, they'll never see us coming. Daniel's voice was small but firm. Then we do it. Tonight. Caleb looked at him. Exactly. Tonight. The lantern light flickered again. Shadows moved along the walls. The barn seemed alive, holding its secrets tight. Caleb studied the floor one last time, noticing a patch of dirt darker than the rest, loose beneath the boards. Some graves, he said quietly, don't stay quiet. And this land remembers everything. Clara's grip tightened on the edge of the crate. Then we'll make it speak. Outside, the wind whispered across the fields. Inside, the small family prepared for the night ahead. Each one aware that the past wasn't done with them yet. That the land itself carried the weight of every stolen acre, every hidden secret, every grave left unmarked. Caleb folded the papers slowly, careful not to crease the edges further. The barn held them close, as if it knew what was coming. The children watched him, faces pale but resolute. Clara pressed a hand over Ruth's mouth, leaning close. "Stay quiet," she whispered. Caleb glanced toward the door. "If they come back, they'll be looking in the wrong place." And for now, that was enough. The barn settled into silence. Dust floated in the lantern light. Shadows stretched across the walls. And somewhere beneath the boards, beneath the hay, beneath the land itself, the past waited to be uncovered. Caleb saddled his horse just as the first pale light of morning crept across the fields. Clara's hands tightened around Ruth and Daniel, her jaw set. The children huddled close, shivering in the chill that didn't come from the air but from the thought of what awaited them. Caleb adjusted the saddle strap and tested the reins. The horse shifted beneath him, uneasy. "You're not going to town," Clara said, her voice sharp, low. "You'll get yourself killed." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I'm going." "That's suicide." "No. It's a message." He swung his leg over and settled in the saddle. His eyes never left the horizon. "A message to the sheriff. To the town. You picked the wrong ranch." Clara's lips pressed together. "You don't understand the town. They all side with him. They've always sided with him." Caleb's gaze hardened. "Not after tonight." The children clung to her skirts. "What message?" Daniel whispered. "That the sheriff's wrong," Caleb said, voice low but firm. "And that lies and graves and stolen land don't last forever." Clara stepped closer to him. "Then explain what you're planning." Caleb paused, letting the words hang in the cold air. "I'm digging up the truth. Every lie. Every cover-up. Everything they tried to hide." Daniel frowned. "Are you gonna fight them?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Not just fight. Expose. The town will see the evidence. They'll see the graves. The deeds. The lies. And the sheriff? He won't like what comes next." Ruth tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Mom, will he come back?" Clara hugged her tightly. "We don't know. But Caleb's right. Someone has to do it." The wind swept across the field, rattling the fence posts. Caleb swung the reins over his horse's neck. "I'm going before they know I'm ready. Once I move, the town has to listen. Or it won't just be me facing the sheriff, it'll be everyone who stayed quiet." Clara's eyes were sharp, wary. "Then they're going to hate you. They'll try to stop you. You know that, right?" Caleb gave a small, almost grim smile. "I'm counting on it. They always pick the side of fear. But fear can be turned." Daniel whispered again, voice trembling. "Do you think we'll be safe?" Caleb glanced back at the barn where they had hidden, at the shadows of the old wooden beams. "For now. But safety is temporary. The truth is permanent." Clara pressed her forehead to Ruth's hair. "We'll do what we can." Caleb swung his leg over the saddle, the horse shifting beneath him. The barn faded behind him, a safe shadow for now. The field stretched wide and empty, the wind cutting sharp across the valley. Somewhere down the road, the town waited, quiet. But Caleb knew its silence wouldn't last. He nudged the horse forward. Each step stirred loose dust from the path, sending it floating in the cold morning light. Clara followed with her eyes, holding the children close. The papers in his saddlebag weighed heavy, but he didn't touch them. They carried the names of people gone, stolen land, and buried lies. "You're walking into their town alone," Clara said softly. "I'm not alone," Caleb said. His eyes never left the horizon. "I have the truth. And that's stronger than any sheriff or deputy or mob." Daniel clutched Clara's hand. "What if they see us?" "They won't," Caleb said. "Not yet. That's why I'm writing now. Before the lies have a chance to react. Clara swallowed. You're brave, Caleb. Or foolish. Maybe both. He looked back once, briefly, at the barn and the three of them. Brave isn't enough. We need everyone who stayed silent to finally speak. Ruth whimpered. Clara pulled her closer. We'll stay quiet. We'll hide. That's what we do until you come back. Caleb adjusted the reins, letting the horse move faster. The dirt road stretched straight to town, lined by fences and low hills. Each turn and rise of the land held shadows that could hide the sheriff's eyes or Caleb's. He moved swiftly, deliberately, knowing the town's silence was a fragile thing. One wrong step and the truth would vanish again. The barn faded behind him. A crow lifted from the fence line, wings cutting through the early light. Caleb kept riding. He passed the well by the edge of the field, its wooden cover dark and still. Somewhere beneath, secrets waited, old as the town itself. Do you think your father would have done the same? Daniel asked quietly, voice trembling in the wind. Caleb's jaw tightened. Yes. He knew the cost of staying silent. And he left signs for those willing to see. Tonight, we follow them. Clara pressed her hand to Ruth's cheek. Then tonight, we survive. That's all we can do until he comes back. The wind shifted, carrying a faint smell of smoke from the distant town. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Someone had already lit a fire to mark their way, or perhaps as a warning. Either way, the town would awaken soon. He rode steadily, slowly, each step measured. The papers in his saddlebag were like a second heart beating against him. Names, deeds, old letters, faded ink, evidence of years of theft and blood. Caleb could feel the weight of every one of them. They weren't just pieces of paper, they were bones, buried under lies, waiting to be uncovered. At the top of the hill, Caleb paused, letting the valley stretch before him. The town below was quiet, but not empty. Windows reflected pale light. Doors shut tight. Every silent face would soon be forced to reckon with what had been buried. Caleb exhaled, letting the cold air fill his lungs. He nudged the horse forward again. One step at a time, toward the sheriff, toward the truth, toward the reckoning that the town had chosen to ignore for far too long. The barn, the children, Clara, they were behind him now. And somewhere ahead, the town waited, holding its breath. Caleb's hand brushed the edge of the papers in the saddlebag. The sheriff didn't know it yet, but tonight the town would wake up. And the silence would finally end. Caleb rode into town slowly, the horse's hooves crunching against the dirt road. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Windows reflected pale light. A few shutters rattled in the morning wind. The sheriff's office sat at the center, a weathered building with peeling paint and an old brass bell above the door. Caleb dismounted a few feet away, tying his horse to a post. He adjusted the papers in his satchel, checking them once more, tracing the faded signatures with his fingers. Every name carried weight, every inked mark a story. He pushed the door open. The smell of old wood and sweat hit him immediately. The sheriff sat behind the desk, calm, as if he had been expecting Caleb all along. His fingers drummed slowly on the surface, eyes narrowing as he studied Caleb. "Well, look who wandered in," the sheriff said, voice flat. "Didn't think you had the guts." Caleb placed the papers on the desk, spreading them carefully. "These were your victims. Your wife's husband. He didn't fall. You killed him." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Strong words for a man alone in my office. Where'd you get those?" "From your victim's widow," Caleb said evenly. "And you?" The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the window. "Hiding her, are you?" "I'm not hiding anyone," Caleb replied. "I'm here to find answers." The sheriff laughed softly. "Answers? In this town, answers are dangerous. You should have stayed on your side of the fence." Caleb leaned forward, voice low and deliberate. "Where's my father?" The sheriff's smile faltered. He stood slowly, shadow falling over the desk. That man ran away. Left this town to rot. Nobody heard from him again. No, Caleb said, shaking his head, voice calm but hard. He didn't run. He discovered what your family had done. And you didn't let him live to tell anyone. The sheriff's face darkened. You're digging into things better left buried. Caleb's eyes scanned the room. Dusty shelves, old ledgers, an empty gun rack. I've got proof now. He tapped the papers. Every name, every deed, every stolen acre. I know what you did, and the town is going to know too. The sheriff slammed his fist on the desk. You got no proof. You think waving old papers around changes anything? They're more than papers, Caleb said. They're evidence. They're bones, buried lies, and memories someone tried to erase. And I'm not the only one who remembers. The sheriff stepped closer, voice rising. Do you know who you're messing with? You think you can just walk in here and challenge me? I'm not just challenging you, Caleb said. I'm forcing the town to see the truth. And you? You won't like what happens when they do. The sheriff reached for the desk drawer. Caleb's hand hovered near his own gun. Every second stretched. The barn, the children, Clara, they were all counting on him to stay calm, to stay sharp. You're playing a dangerous game, the sheriff hissed, voice low now, venomous. One wrong move, and it's over for you. Caleb didn't flinch. I've already seen what you're capable of. It won't stop me. The sheriff's eyes glinted with anger, then something else, fear, maybe, buried under decades of power. Those papers, if anyone sees them. They will, Caleb said. Starting now. The sheriff leaned back, his face pale. You'll be the death of yourself, Caleb. I swear it. Caleb straightened, voice steady. Then let's see which one of us lives. The air in the office felt thick. Sunlight shifted across the floorboards. Dust moved in the rays. Caleb's hand brushed the papers again, tracing the old names of men long dead or disappeared. His father's handwriting was there. Faded, but unmistakable. Proof that the sheriff's family had buried history, tried to erase it, and left graves unmarked. I know about the graves, Caleb said quietly. I know about the bodies you left behind. I know about the lawmen who vanished, and the land you stole. You can deny it all you want, but this town will see it. The sheriff's hand twitched near the drawer again. Caleb shifted slightly, ready. Go ahead. Reach for it. Every move you make tells the story. Every step is remembered. The town is already waking up. They'll see what you tried to hide. The sheriff stared at him, silent, breathing hard. You think the town cares? They do when they see the bones and the deeds, Caleb said. When they see what you've done. You're not untouchable. The sheriff's fingers curled into fists. You think you're smart. You think you can bring me down. Caleb smiled faintly. I'm not the one. The town is. And I've lit the match. The sheriff's face grew darker. You're digging a grave for yourself. I might be, Caleb said quietly. But it won't be me who's buried in silence. It'll be you, along with every lie you ever told. The room felt smaller. Shadows leaned over the walls. Every noise from outside seemed louder, footsteps on the porch, the wind through the cracks, the distant calls of a morning bird. Caleb's gaze stayed locked on the sheriff, calm, steady, unwavering. You're going to regret this, the sheriff said, voice low, sharp. Maybe, Caleb admitted. But at least the truth will live. That's worth the risk. The sheriff leaned back against the desk, chest heaving, face pale and tight. Caleb straightened, running a hand over the satchel. The papers, the evidence, the names of the lost, the graves, they were all here. All waiting. All the town needed was someone to see them. You're lucky, Caleb said softly. The town hasn't woken yet. But it will. And when it does, nothing you've built will stand. The sheriff said nothing. He only stared. shadows stretched across the office. Dust drifted in the pale morning light. Caleb picked up the papers again, careful, deliberate. "The past doesn't stay buried," he said quietly. "Not when someone remembers. Not when someone comes looking. And tonight, the town will remember too." A silence hung between them, thick and heavy, before Caleb turned toward the door. The sheriff's eyes followed him, hard and unreadable, but for the first time, they flickered with something like fear. Caleb stepped outside into the morning light. The town was quiet. Too quiet. The wind tugged at his coat. Somewhere far off, a crow called. The papers in his satchel weighed heavy against his hip. Every name, every deed, every ghost was moving with him now. The sheriff hadn't yet realized what he had started. But soon, the town would wake. And Caleb would make sure it did. Inside the barn, Clara pressed Ruth and Daniel close, listening to the faint stir of the town beyond the fields. The early sun cast pale streaks through the cracks in the boards, illuminating dust and cobwebs, and the family huddled together as if trying to vanish into the shadows. Clara's hands were steady now, but her chest rose and fell with a quiet tension. She kept her revolver close, fingers brushing the cold metal. "Mom," Daniel whispered, voice trembling. "Do you think he'll be all right?" Clara glanced toward the barn door, eyes narrowing at the thought of Caleb facing the sheriff alone. "He has to be," she said softly. "He's smart. He knows what he's doing." Ruth sniffled and pressed her face into her mother's coat. "I don't want them to find us." "You won't let them," Clara murmured. "We stay quiet. We don't give them a reason." Daniel peeked through the gap in the boards. "I saw movement in town. People. They're looking." Clara stiffened. "Stay away from the cracks. Don't watch. Don't even breathe if you have to." The children nodded, silent. Dust swirled around their knees as they pressed against the hay, watching shadows dance on the walls. The barn had become a fortress, a fragile shield against the eyes outside. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind felt amplified. Clara could feel it in her bones, the land itself seemed aware of the past and present colliding here. Caleb's voice drifted faintly in her memory. "The town is already waking. They'll see what's been buried. They'll see the graves, the deeds, the lies. Will they help?" Daniel asked, whispering. Clara shook her head. "Some will. Most, they're afraid." The children stayed pressed close, silent but attentive. Clara's hand rested on Ruth's back. "But someone has to remember. Someone has to see the truth. Even if it's just one person." Ruth peeked up. "That's him?" "Yes," Clara said quietly. "That's Caleb." Dust shifted near the barn door. Clara's hand tightened on the revolver. She scanned the shadows. Every noise became a threat, wind rattling the roof, a loose board swaying, the low whinny of a horse somewhere beyond. The children flinched. Clara leaned close. "No one comes in here. Not yet. Stay calm. Stay quiet." Daniel's small voice trembled. "I don't want to hide forever." Clara pulled him closer. "No one does. But hiding keeps us alive. For now." The barn seemed to breathe around them. Shadows stretched along the walls, the light shifting with every passing second. Clara noticed an old, dark stain on the floorboards near the corner, half covered by hay. Something about it made her stomach tighten. It reminded her of the stories her husband had whispered, of graves beneath old barns, of secrets hidden where people least expected them. She didn't speak aloud, but her fingers brushed the edge of the floorboards, testing them gently. They were loose. Concealed. Just as Caleb had said, the land remembered. Daniel noticed her pause. "Mom, what is it?" Clara pressed a finger to her lips. "Nothing yet. Just stay still. Watch, listen, and wait." Ruth whimpered softly, curling closer. Clara held her tight. Every breath of the children felt like a fragile thread keeping them anchored to life, to safety, to hope. Outside, the distant clatter of hooves and voices floated across the field. Caleb's words echoed in her mind. The town is waking. The past won't stay buried forever. Clara's jaw tightened. We see everything, she whispered to the children. We see, we remember, we survive. Daniel's eyes were wide. Like ghosts? Clara gave a small nod. Yes. Like ghosts. Watching. Waiting. Remembering. They stayed pressed against the hay, silent. The shadows on the walls stretched and shifted. Dust danced in the shafts of morning light. Every creak of the barn felt amplified, every faint sound from beyond the fence made their hearts jump. Clara's hands never left the revolver. She could feel the weight of what had happened, the burned house, her husband, the sheriff's lies, pressing down like the air before a storm. And the children were seeing it all. Every fear, every secret, every danger. Every lie that had been buried beneath decades of silence. They watched the barn, the land, the shadows, and even the light, learning to see the invisible threats and hidden truths. Clara whispered, low and steady. Remember this. Everything. The land remembers. The shadows remember. And one day, we'll make sure the town remembers too. Daniel pressed closer. Ruth pressed closer still. Clara felt the weight of their small bodies, fragile yet determined. Together, they formed a silent promise, witnesses to the past, guardians of the truth. The barn was quiet again, but the air felt electric. Somewhere beyond the fields, the town was stirring. Voices, hooves, distant shouts. Caleb had gone into the storm of it alone, but the children would see it all. Every movement, every lie, every secret, because the children saw everything. And the barn held its breath with them, waiting. The shadows stretched long, the dust floated slowly in the lantern light, and the weight of history pressed against the wooden walls. Clara held the children close and whispered again, we survive. We watch. We remember. And one day, the town will know. The wind shifted. A loose board creaked. The children flinched. Clara whispered softly, steadying them. Shoo, just watch. Just wait. And in the quiet, the barn itself seemed to listen, guarding them, holding secrets, holding hope, holding truth. The town had begun to stir, though slowly. Caleb moved through the streets with measured steps, papers tucked under his arm. Windows shuttered in fear, doors closed tight. Every corner held eyes watching, every whisper carried suspicion. The sheriff's men had spread out, searching, questioning, but no one dared speak up. Silence hung heavy, thick like the morning fog over the dirt streets. Caleb stopped at the edge of the town square, glancing at the old well at its center. The iron cover was rusted, the stone dark with age. He knew what lay beneath. Every town had its secrets, and this one had buried more than most. He tapped the satchel, feeling the weight of the documents inside. Names, deeds, old letters, buried truths. Every one of them a nail in the coffin of the sheriff's lies. The sheriff appeared at the edge of the square, flanked by 2 deputies. His hat pulled low, eyes hard, mouth tight. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched Caleb, calculating, silent. The air between them vibrated with tension, the quiet hum of a town waiting for something it didn't want to see. You shouldn't be here, the sheriff said finally, voice sharp and cold. You think wandering into my town with a stack of old papers makes you untouchable? Caleb set the papers on a nearby crate. I'm not untouchable. But the truth is. And the town will see it. The sheriff took a slow step forward. The town chose silence a long time ago. Don't think you can change that. Caleb leaned against the crate. Silence isn't loyalty. And fear isn't respect. The town remembers. Even if it won't speak yet. Daniel and Ruth watched from the barn, their small faces pressed to the gaps in the boards. Clara held them close, whispering for them to be quiet, to stay calm. Every word Caleb spoke carried across the square, even if the children could barely understand its weight. The sheriff's hand hovered near his belt. You're making a mistake. You and that family of yours. You think you can stir up the past and walk away? I'm not walking away, Caleb said calmly. I'm forcing it to surface. The graves, the deeds, the lies. They won't stay buried any longer. A deputy shifted behind the sheriff. Boss, maybe we should. Quiet, the sheriff snapped. Let him talk. Caleb unfolded one of the papers and held it out. These are names. Dates. Every acre your family stole. Every lie you buried. Every person who vanished. They're all here. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the papers, tight and wary. You can't prove any of that. Caleb's lips curled slightly. I don't have to. The town will see it. And when they do, no lie, no power, no badge will save you. The sheriff stepped closer, voice low and menacing. You're risking everything. Your life. The lives of the woman and children hiding in that barn. You're risking them for a story that won't matter. They're not hiding anymore, Caleb said, voice steady. They're waiting. They see everything. They remember everything. And one day soon, the town will too. Daniel whispered to Ruth, barely audible. Mom, what's he going to do? Clara pressed a hand over Ruth's mouth. He can't hurt us yet. Not if we stay silent. The sheriff's shadow fell long across the square. He leaned down, eyes sharp. Do you understand the danger you've brought down on all of them? Caleb nodded. I do. And it's a risk I'm willing to take. The sheriff straightened, stepping back. You'll regret this. Every single one of you. And when you do, there'll be no one to save you. Caleb folded the papers carefully. Maybe. But the truth isn't mine to save. It belongs to the town. And it belongs to the children. They're already watching. They're already remembering. That's more powerful than fear. The sheriff glared, fists tight at his sides. You think a couple of kids and a widow can undo me? Caleb's voice was quiet, deliberate. They don't have to. The town will do that. And when it does, you'll realize what happens when silence ends. The wind shifted, stirring dust across the square. Windows rattled. Shadows stretched across the walls. Caleb adjusted the papers, feeling their weight against his arm. He turned slowly toward the barn, toward the children, toward Clara. The sheriff's men shifted nervously, sensing something they couldn't yet name. Fear moved quietly through them, brushing the edges of their uniforms. Caleb's eyes didn't leave the barn. He could feel the weight of every secret, every grave, every lie the sheriff had tried to bury. You're running out of time, the sheriff said, voice low but sharp. Caleb straightened, hand brushing the papers. Not yet. But soon. Very soon, the town will wake. And then you'll have nowhere left to hide. The sheriff's eyes flicked toward the barn. Caleb met his gaze evenly, calmly. The moment stretched, long and taut, like a wire pulled too tight. Dust drifted in the morning light. A crow called from the roof. The town waited. Breath held. Shadows leaned across the square. Caleb turned and walked slowly toward the barn. Every step was deliberate. Every shadow, every stone, every window of that silent town seemed to notice. The sheriff's shadow stretched, long and tense, reaching across the square but unable to touch what Caleb carried. Daniel and Ruth pressed closer to Clara. Mom, he's coming back? Clara nodded, voice low. Yes. And we see everything now. We remember. And the town will too. Caleb reached the barn door. The lantern light flickered across the wooden boards. Dust floated in the beams. Shadows shifted as if alive. The sheriff's shadow lingered in the square, long and dark, but Caleb didn't stop. He stepped inside, the weight of the papers heavy, the truth heavier. And for the first time, the town began to stir, not with fear, but with something far older, far stronger, the memory of what had been buried. The barn doors closed behind him. The sheriff's shadow fell across the square, reaching, waiting, powerless against what was already in motion. The barn was quiet again, but it carried the weight of the morning's tension like a living thing. Caleb set the papers down on the crate, careful not to crease them. Clara held Ruth close while Daniel sat on the hay, legs pulled tight to his chest. Dust drifted in the shafts of light slicing through the cracks in the boards. The barn smelled of hay, sweat, and old wood, but beneath it all, there was something darker, something almost like memory itself pressing against the walls.